and I am recording to the cloud. Okay, I think recording has successfully started. So my name is Vitaly. Hello, everyone, and I will be the host for the first talk that Kirill will be giving. And first, I need to say a few words about the conference. Team-Driven Con is an online conference project that we decided to create in a very new format, 1 week intensives with daily Zoom sessions, our community in Slack, and our top beautiful and smart experts, of course. Team-Driven Con helps people to build a career in IT by simply acquiring new skills and knowledge from our experts and networking. We're organizing this particular event for European participants for the first time, so we decided to start real small, 3-day meetup with 4 sessions only. All the sessions will be recorded, so you can review them after the conference if you wish. And today, this conference is about hiring engineering managers. We chose this topic because pretty much every engineering manager will eventually have to search for a new position. And it's just good to know in advance the peculiarities of the process, the salary ranges, etc. So we will provide a few viewpoints on the process. First one, the one that we're going to be having today, is the overview of the job market. Second two will be public interviews. And the third one, or fourth one, will be group CV review. And I also want to say thanks to our partner. We, of course, are very grateful to our experts for taking time to participate in the conference. But without partner, it will be harder for us to maintain the conference and to create it. So our main sponsor is case.io. It is a modern test management system for development and QA teams. Give it a try if you wish. And the last bit for me is about rules. So I want to mention that if you have any questions during the talk, you can put them in Q&A section in your Zoom main menu. And as soon as Kirill is done with his talk, he will try to answer all of them if we have enough time. And of course, you're welcome to continue the conversations in our team-driven Slack. So don't forget to check in. And with that, I shall give words to Kirill. Kirill, thank you. And introduce yourself first and proceed with the talk, please.
Sure. So hello, everyone. Let me share my screen first. All right. Can you see my screen? Perfect. So who am I? Nice to meet everyone again. My name is Kirill. I work in the consulting department of KornFerry. I usually cover topics like organizational strategy and employee experience, even though I work with some other topics such as total reward. And if you're not familiar with the company I'm working for, it's KornFerry. It has several major businesses like executive search and professional search, but the biggest part of it is consulting. So we cover different topics, but usually we work with the organizations to help them develop their strategies, to help them organize work, to help them motivate their people, and also for them to build a career, etc. So today we're going to speak about rewards, about pay, about salaries. But first of all, before we get to the salary part, I would also like to discuss several other topics that are, in my opinion, extremely important when you speak about salaries in general. On some of my slides, you'll see a lot of words and a lot of numbers. Don't pay too much attention to it, because first, I'm a consultant. I cannot make a presentation without a lot of words or without numbers. And second, I will share the presentation anyway, so you'll have enough time to look at it after the webinar. So try just listening to me and concentrate on the questions you might have, because some of the points, I guess, will be controversial to you. So don't hesitate to write them in chat or in Q&A session. So let's start. First of all, do you earn a lot or not? When we're speaking about reward, the most important word, is it fair or not? So we usually don't have any employers who pay a lot or not. It's about fairness. Usually fairness does depend on three things. It's about the job to be done, which is basically the complexity of the job that the employer is asking you to do. It's about external market, meaning how other companies are paying for similar jobs, and internal equity, meaning am I getting the same as my colleague who's doing similar job? These are the objective criteria, but also people, when they decide if they're paid fairly or not, inevitably evaluate some other things like the line manager he's working with, or is top management providing any clear direction, or are you enabled to do what you need to do? Are you allowed to express your opinion, etc.? So many different things are usually in the perception of people when they think about their pay and is it fair? But actually, an important part is that I've often heard people saying they know how their job is paid in the market, but actually people do not usually know at all. If you can look at the survey, yeah, when people are paid below the market, they usually know it. But as you can see, that's only 1/3 of people who are actually paid above the market believe they're paid above. And 2/3 of people who's at market level still believe they're paid below. And this is an important point. And first, I'll explain what could be done about it and what actually my company is doing about it. So one of our parts of our business is to help companies work with their rewards, design the reward strategy and philosophy and pay ranges, etc. And yeah, this slide. So each year we conduct a special salary survey to really understand what is market paying to different jobs. And to do so, we work directly with compensation and benefits department. So basically we gather information on the real payouts throughout the year. It's not about perception of people who's searching for a job or the vacancy. And do so we gather a lot of data. And when you gather a lot of data, and for example, well, we gather more than 25 million salary data points per year. So to analyze it and to compare salaries of different specialists from different companies, you need a kind of a methodology to compare all of them. I'll explain a little bit more on the methodology, but what you need to know, we use the methodology of leveling or grading. It can be called differently. But the major part of it is to get rid of the job title approach. Because nowadays the job title does not represent the complexity of the work you're doing. And the second part is that the criteria you're using should be consistent to avoid judgmental view of some people to what's going on. So the criteria we are using looks like this. We define levels, and levels are defined by the methodology. So the logic is pretty simple. Any job has accountability, meaning why this job even exists in the company structure. What is the value it brings to the company? What is the weight of this job in the overall business results? To reach the targets that the job is accountable for, the job holder solves some problems. And here we evaluate the complexity of these problems and the freedom to think, as we call it. Do you need to align with your manager to solve a problem, or can you do it yourself? Things like that. And to solve problems, you need some know-how. So you need practical and technical knowledge. You need some knowledge on planning, organizing. You need some communication skills, especially if you're in a manager position. So overall, we evaluate the level in some points, and this points results into a grade. When comparing different grades, you can ask, how do I define the difference between grades? So it's pretty simple. I'm not sure if I show some slides that explain this thing, but basically we call it a just noticeable difference. There is a simple thing called Friday to Monday test. So let's imagine that you're promoted on Friday. And on Monday, you need to step into the new role. So if this feels naturally, if it's a different but still reliable job, if you feel like you would be completely ready to hold this position in like 1 month, then it's the difference of 1 step. If you feel like this is significantly different, it's bigger, and it's quite, well, it feels like a real promotion, and you need some time to adjust up to 6 months, then this is 2 steps. And if you feel like this is a completely new world, there is a high risk that you won't succeed at all, you will need some mentorship and a large amount of support, and you will need like 1 year to cope with the new objectives, then this is 3 steps. If it's 4 steps, it's usually considered impossible promotion. So why do we use the system? A lot of numbers incoming. But you actually don't need to pay attention to exact numbers. All numbers on this page are completely imaginary. Salaries like this do not exist. So let's consider a situation when you're making a decision on hiring someone or promoting someone to a position of a leading developer. We understand that there is a job called leading developer, but also we understand that leading developers differ. So here I have some demo of how it could look like. We have a number of leading developers on the market, which are from 14 to 19 levels. And we can see that their remuneration also is very different. If we make decision based on just the job title, we come to a number of 17,000 with something on average. But if we actually take a look at this thing, at the level by level comparison, we can see that it's enormously different. And why does it matter? So let's imagine you're hiring someone when the real job level is 15. The candidate will happily accept your offer because it's above the market. If you're trying to work with the retention, you're denying the chance that the person will leave voluntarily, even if he doesn't do anything valuable. And if it's a performance issue, then there's a high doubt that the person will not set the targets, and because he doesn't have the skills probably. And if the real level of the job is 18, then you're reducing the likelihood of candidates accepting your offer. If it's for retention, the risk of this person leaving the company grows really, really high. And in the performance matters, the employee will express the resentment and then reduce the productivity most probably to kind of align with the remuneration it has. So this is why it's important. When working with the companies, we help to create this leveling, and then any company, well, almost any company bigger than a particular amount of employees, create some kind of a ranging system where you have a particular level or grade, and it has a salary range. So from this point of view, you do not have salary. People don't have salary from the organizational level. A job has a salary, and a job falls into a particular grade. And then when you speak to the employer defines to which part of this range you fall. So what also affects your salary? First, we have discussed that the grade, meaning the value that the job brings to the business. The second thing is the market value. It's about salary surveys or any kind of market information. In some cases, the market value is not really easily obtainable if we're speaking about really rare skills on the market, or if you're speaking about high-level top managers, when the person is defining the job itself. We also speak about skills and competencies, which we call talent of the employee. It can be measured actually, because each company probably has a kind of a high potential talent pools. And you basically understand that the person is of high talent by ambition, by the level of the job he's producing, etc., and also the results of your work. Even when speaking about joining a new company, well, it's usually at some degree you can understand that speaking to the former employee, speaking to the employee himself. So next, we're gonna move to the part where more numbers will appear. So at this point, do we have any questions regarding what I had just been speaking about?
We have Bikram raised his hand, but I'm not sure. Bikram, do you want to say something? Text to the chat, please, if you want to ask a question right now. I guess not. Let's proceed, Kirill, and if we will have questions in the Q&A, I will tell you about them. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to move to the part where we discuss salaries, and to give you some more insight on how to understand the level you're on, or your colleague on, or anyone on. This is usually the questions that we use to understand the level. This is just the example, because usually it's more complex, and usually you need more questions to understand the level. But this is kind of a starting point. So on the next slide, I have some kind of a description of different levels. I use the application development because I guess it's familiar to everyone. But keep in mind that it's not kind of a description of the level. It's just to give you some starting point. So if we take a look, I won't say everything that's written here, but just take a look to understand what exactly matters when you're discussing levels. So usually you won't see any particular skills in the description of levels, because skills are kind of a hygiene factor for you getting the job. It's more about it's about accountability. It's about the influence you're gonna have for your organization. This is the lower level. And if we move forward to more managerial roles, something like this. I see Bikram's question. While everyone reads, I can quickly answer that. Well, basically, we use the same mechanism written here. So it's about the market, and it's about grades, but also it's about the company's reward strategy and reward philosophy. What it means is that some companies want to pay, for example, their developers, as their IT department, at the highest market level, because their position is that we want to hire the best people available, meaning they should target at the 19th percentile of the market or even more. And it often also includes some extensive benefit packages, etc. Sometimes for some other jobs, for example, for support jobs, for accountants, let's say, or administrative staff, you don't want to pay the maximum. You want to pay the market median, so just the people of a relevant level would come. Yeah, and this too, Vitali. So yeah, let's move forward. I hope everyone has now read if he wanted to. So first of all, when we speak about Europe, we can see that Europe is not the same. I have taken Great Britain as an example. So on this slide, Great Britain is 100%, and we compare every country, well, not every, but some of the countries to Great Britain. You can see the difference could be to 50%, but this is even a weighted average comparison, as we call it. So when we start looking at it in more details, then you can see that, and more numbers incoming, that if we look level by level, this number would be different for different jobs. So for example, you can see that in Spain, you will get even more on average if you're a top guy of a top job. But on the lower levels, you will earn less. And the same thing happens everywhere, except for the countries that fall behind due to economical state of the country. And these levels become more and more important when we speak about rewards of particular jobs on particular markets. So let's take a look at the application development salaries in France. First of all, I don't think that you need to look through all the numbers you see here, but I just want to explain what's here. So when we analyze salaries, we never use the average numbers, as, for example, newspapers like to do. Because average numbers do not show you anything. Instead, we use the median and percentile scenario, meaning that we have kind of a row of numbers where median is the middle point of it. So at this point, this is what's usually called a market level. At this point, 50% of companies pay more than this, and 50% of companies pay less. And here we have the percentiles, the 19s, the 10s, the 25th, 75th, and the 90s. So yeah, if you're considering what the market is, it's this number usually. What you also need to understand is that good employers never willing to pay the median, because median, it's mediocre. You usually don't want to be mediocre. You want to be like mediocre plus a little bit more. So if you're considering yourself as a candidate for a good company, for a top company, you probably need to aim for this level. Also, I have a lot of data here. I'm not sure how many time we should spend on this. So I'll just sleep quickly through the slides, sharing some general thoughts. I thought when analyzing the data. So in France, what was interesting to me is that I have seen no significant difference between base salary and total cash. Total cash is base salary plus any kind of incentives you earn throughout the year. So it was relatively the same. And my conclusion is that in France, it's not really popular to give bonuses, and people usually prefer just stable pay. If we compare application developers to software engineers, then in general, software engineers earn less. But in our survey, I did not find any information on software engineers above the level 18, meaning they could be considered differently at this stage. For example, they can be considered a higher managers rather than just software engineers at a high level. And in case of the best companies, meaning if you look at 75th percentile and 90th percentile, they seem to be preferring the base pay. It seems like they do not give nice bonuses. If you look at UK market, in general, it's less than France for application development, but they go to the same level when we apply bonuses, which is kind of a common story. And if you look at software engineers, they usually get a little bit more than application developers, which makes sense to me. If you look at Germany, in Germany, developers earn consistently more, which is kind of a surprise looking at the slide I've shown you with the comparison of different countries in Europe. The Germany has not been too much above UK, but in case of application developers, they are. And on higher levels, we can see that bonuses are significant. If you compare the numbers, the bonuses are quite significant. And software engineers, they earn more on the higher jobs and less on the lower jobs. And probably they don't have any bonuses. In Netherlands, the same situation, they pay less on their lower levels, but on the higher levels, they pay significantly more than others. which is also surprising to me, but data is data. Okay. Any questions on that?
There was a question, Kirill, on the numbers. Is it easy for you to transform them to annual salaries later when you provide the information?
Well, actually, usually we analyze only the annual numbers. It's just not the first time that I speak this content to some audiences, and usually audiences find it easier to consider on a monthly basis. Yeah, that's why I transferred all the figures from the annual to monthly, which is not even correct from the methodological stand of view, because base salary also includes, for example, guaranteed payments. It's not just salary, but yeah.
And there was also a question from, I'm not sure about the nickname of a person. It shows iPhone MMNT. The source for these numbers. I answered this question saying that you work at a huge company which consults enterprise and SMEs and other companies, so that you said, I think it was 25 million salary points, salary items that you collected to analyze the data,
throughout
right?
the year worldwide, yeah. Just to remind everyone, this data I'm showing is the data that has been provided to us by the companies themselves. By the any company has a compensation and benefits department, or at least a person who calculates all the salaries, increases, etc. So they provide us exactly what they have paid to their employees throughout the year. And you can ask why would they provide the real numbers. First, we're a global, worldwide known company where security is the first word. If we ever breach anyone's data, then our business is finished. And it exists for more than 70 years, so we're fine with that. And the second, everyone is interested in getting the real market data. And they understand that if they do not provide the real data, then everyone else would also not provide the real data. So this is kind of a game theory for everyone, and everyone provides the real data. And this is the data you're looking at the moment. Any other questions? Because I'm going to move to another topic.
I think let's move.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have time in the end. Okay, so now I'm going to speak a little bit about trends that I see on the European markets, not only me, but my colleagues also who work in the technological space. So first of all, IT differs. This is kind of a simple thought, but when we're considering IT salaries, we need to understand that there are two extremes. There are shared service centers or some kind of supporting companies that do not actually create a lot of value. They kind of support the systems or support other companies or outsource something, etc. So usually the specialists from these kind of workplaces do not pay a lot. And we have another extreme, which is this, as we call it, Silicon Valley type companies, aiming to be unicorns, where they do not really care about salaries at all. They give what the candidate is asking for just because they are not earning money, so they do not care about the operational expenses, etc. What they are searching for is some kind of expert skills or different mindsets, the consumer-based mindset, and some new digital skills. Also, the other peculiarity of pay in these companies is that they usually do not have variable pay at all, because they want their people to be committed every day, and if the results are kind of phantom, then you cannot promise anything to people, or they go the other way and promise high LTI. LTI is long-term incentives, so options, etc. So if it works, it works. You're a millionaire, and all the rest fall behind this thing. So either are you here or are you there? the other thing that's really being discussed by everyone these days is how do you manage the performance of IT guys? So the first real question is about individual and team objectives. So the individual objectives usually harm the performance of agile teams or just the development teams. Because when people have the individual objectives, they aim to be productive themselves, not to be productive in the group. And if you set the team objective, then it becomes harder for people to kind of grow, to move on their career, because the perception of their influence on the ending result is kind of a blurred. And the second question is that traditional KPIs do not really work, but they should not work because traditional KPIs was made for pay for performance. You do something, you earn some points, let's call it, and you get some money based on the amount of points you're getting. In the modern IT companies, performance is not the result, it's the behavior, basically. It's the process of your development and the development of what you're doing in your company, the product, anything. So we see some new kind of performance management systems that are becoming popular slowly. The first one is shadow ratings, meaning employees do not know the criteria they're being evaluated on. And the connection with the reward is not direct. It's just kind of a system of thinking for managers to evaluate. And the same is with no rating. But no rating system needs a really trained managers, starting from team leaders to the upper levels, because they really need to move away from subjective perception of what's going on, and you need to train them a lot because usually people are not so easily developed into this direction, but it works in some companies. Managers are assessing the success of their people, of their teams, etc. And the payments are calibrated based on their feedback, which is usually, by the way, is not shared with the employees themselves. So some other trends. Skill-based pay became really popular in the last 5 years, I would say, especially in the IT industry. But now it loses its positions because we see no lack of skill on the market. What companies lack at the moment is the conceptual expertise of higher level or customer-focused mindset, the people who are actually able to drive the business results, to drive the other employees they're working on, etc. So behavioral competencies and mindset are getting more and more important if you want to grow. And also the other trend connected to this is that software engineering managers by some companies are no longer considered the IT guys. They are now sitting in the organizational structure. I mean, in the engineering departments, for example, if you speak about companies like Volkswagen, all their software engineers are now in the engineering departments with people who engineer engines and things like that. And the idea is simple. Car nowadays is a computer on the wheels. And if you're engineering part of the product, you should be together with the guys who engineer other parts of the product. The other thing is that more and more employers understand that if your brand is not strong enough, you need to pay more attention to the actual design of the job. Back to what we have spoken about in the beginning, job to be done. Many companies cannot provide interesting tasks to the employees, which affects their possibility to retain talent, to retain talent, etc. So they are also paying a lot of attention to career and development possibilities for those people who do not get a lot of drive with what they're doing on the routine day job. And the second main trend It's actually connected to hybrid working trend, which started during pandemic. So everyone is thinking what's the best way to organize work during the times where majority of people work from home or from cafes or from other countries, etc. But even more important topic is not even pay of these jobs, but how to keep them inside ecosystem, how to keep them connected, especially when people do not like to be connected to anyone. From the organizational point of view, you always want your team to be connected because it affects the results. Even if someone tells you it's not, it is. And during these times, many employers understood that they actually do not need to hire a lot of people for a project they have for like 6 months. It's quite easy to borrow talent, meaning to get them on outsource or on terminal contracts. And the main point of discussion is how you make sure that these outsourcers or terminal workers are also part of the ecosystem. I think we just go on until the end and then I answer the questions, right? Okay, so the next slide. Before I show it, I'll explain to you what it is. So my company does not only work on the salary pay ranges, it also works with the development of people inside the organizations from the top level to the specialist level. And we have some kind of methodologies to assess, to kind of bring some data into assessments of people. So we have a methodology called 4 dimensions, as we call it. The 4 dimensions are competencies, traits, drivers, and experience. You don't see any skills here. It's since skills do not predict high performance based on the research. Competencies do. Skills do not. So what you see here is kind of a profile of a modern digital leader who is set to succeed in the new environment based on our research. And just to clarify, we have a KornFerry Institute in the USA, an organization who is devoted exactly to making researches on what's working and what's not. So some interesting points here. Competencies is about behavior, and they are easy to observe and develop. And we see here that you don't see like something like hard working here. You see that a person who will succeed in the new modern environment in digital cultivates innovation, manages ambiguity, and has a strategic mindset, which is usually competencies that help top managers. But now we can see that 90 people really need top managers' competencies to succeed. Drives engagement, meaning of people, which is strongly connected to being connected. Sorry for this. And drives result, but this is kind of universal thing that's important in all times. Traits. You can see here, well, you would say it's obvious, but it's usually not. Only, according to our research, only 15% of people we've assessed have shown this set of traits that is natural to them. So this is basically what you should aim for. And drivers, you see that, for example, from the structure perspective, an interesting thing is that people that will succeed in the new world prefer asymmetric, unstructured work environment, which is strongly connected to the to the ambiguity of the modern life. Okay, and the last topic I have. So it's about growth. You have probably all seen the situation where a good developer, engineer, anyone is being promoted to a team leader role and he does not succeed. The reason for that is that team leaders face different objectives, the nature of work is different, success is being defined in different manner. So the objectives of this role being present in the organizational structure is different, but this goes the same way for any kind of promotion if it's not just the career ladder promotion. one step. So this is kind of a simple advice. When you decide on your next career step, think of what you get drive on. Let's look at this example. So a common team leader has a lot of different ways of moving further their career, but any different role is about different things. For example, a lot of people I've heard, especially junior developers, for example, they say, I want to be CTO in the future. But CTO, it's not the role about expertise. It's not the role about development. It's about politics and it's about strategy. So CTO is more similar to chief financial officer, for example, or chief commercial officer than to a developer or any technical guy. So any role has its nature, and nature is not only about your preferences, but it's also about things we have spoken about here, competencies and traits. You will feel natural in one roles based on your traits and unnatural in others. And also your competencies, meaning your typical behavior suits one role and doesn't fit the other. And the last slide I have, I think, for today is a slide I really like. It's about that usually people, when considering what their employer is doing to them, are only thinking about this part. Well, in some cases, they just think about this part. But they forget that, well, employer also wants something from them. So the whole process of defining your total rewards package is a game of weighting different options to, from one side, not overpay, but also to achieve all these things. So usually not a single employer thinks of how to pay you less. And this part is also, I feel, quite useful when you're evaluating what's going on in your company, with your life, etc. So this thing is only one line in this list. So what I offer you to do is to rethink some things over, like after my session, rethink what your employer is giving to you. It's hardly only about direct pay. Rethink how you perceive the market level pay. Is that is what you think a market level is really comparable to you? Rethink what your true value for the company is. And I have some questions in the presentation that will help. So, because anything of this will help you in any further discussions of your career and pay with your employer, current or the next one. I think I'm done with the presentation part, so I'm ready to answer some questions.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. We have two questions so far. First, Konstantin is asking, does the place of residence affect the candidate's salary or remote?
Usually, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, yes, since company cannot pay the same amount to every employee in every country because the cost of living in every country differs. Mm-hmm. So if we give $10,000, for example, for an employee in the USA and $10,000 for an employee in Czech Republic, let's say, mm-hmm. then in the USA, this employee is paid at markets, and in Czech Republic, it's a top manager salary.
Right. All right. And as far as I remember, big corps in the US are trying now to get people back to the offices, and they also have different pay for those who live in different states, right? Yeah, and in the United States, the market is that in every state, there is a market level. Mm-hmm. So if the employee says, I live in Chicago, but I work for the company in California, let's say, mm-hmm. Then if you stay in Chicago, we pay you at the Chicago level. Right. Okay. And there is, Konstantin, please tell us if you think the question is not answered. I will mark it answered so far. And another question from Andrei. Has COVID affected the difference in salaries between European countries? Has the spread decreased? Well, it did affect the difference in salaries, but only for the first half a year, I would say. Mm-hmm. So
you need to understand that things like pandemic creates a lot of chaotic and non-logical solutions. So I have seen situations when people from CIS countries, for example, received salary offers with the level of pay from Germany, for example.
Right. I'm the lucky one.
Yeah, but when when a year passed, for example, then companies started to calculate, and the calculate of the operational expenses they are seeing have made them turn their minds.
Thank you.
But the difference is less right now, I would say.
All right. Does anyone from the audience, does anyone have any other question? If you want, you can jump in, you can raise your hand, and we will let you in the discussion as a panelist.
Yeah, we can talk.
Yeah. Before we decide what to do next, Kirill, will you be able, as someone asked, to change the numbers to annuals, or is it going to be hard for you?
Well, it would take me like 2 minutes, so I don't think it would be
Yeah,
hard.
please do. So when you're sending, Kirill will also send the presentation, the slides, to our Slack channel. So we will have all the data he prepared carefully, and he will transform the data to annual salaries. And there were many questions about taxation in different companies. But Kirill, I think you mentioned that it's not only taxes, it's also level of living and like what you can afford for a certain amount of money.
Yeah, so you never give a salary to an employee. You give him basically the possibilities to live in the country, in the region he's in.
Yeah, it's like when I used to live in London, the kindergarten for the kid was only free. It was free only for 3 hours a day. And if I wanted 8 hours, I would pay 1,000 pounds, which is quite a fortune, right? So it means that you have to, if you want to see what your salary will afford you, you'll have to carefully calculate all your needs and necessities and see what they are worth in different countries.
Yeah, and this is why companies increase salaries when inflation grows, for example.
Yeah, makes sense. Konstantin is saying, looks like COVID leveled remote candidate. I don't think so. Well, I mean, my experience is very limited in terms of seeing salaries of different companies, but I don't think that remote candidates have the same salaries now. What do you think?
Well, we actually are moving to a point where employers stop thinking about remote candidates as kind of a different candidate. They start considering them as the regular candidates with some exceptions for those who are really remote.
All right. So the overall landscape is changing.
Yeah. But well, the whole landscape is changing. Yeah. It's not only about COVID, for example. COVID also presented us the break in the logistic chains, for example, etc. It all matters.
Yeah. There is another question from Pavel. He's saying, Kirill, is there any difference between salary levels for people working for temporary contracts and for permanent contracts?
Usually not.
Oh, that's very interesting.
So the common practice is that they should earn basically the same. Sometimes they are offered more because they will be guaranteed to leave the company in a particular amount of time. But some employers think that, well, you've accepted the contract then.
That's very strange.
You're doing the same job.
What I remember, like once again, from the UK experience I had, that contractors, those who are on temporary contracts, they earn twice more, I think, in software development. Because
well, as
again,
I said, sometimes they earn more.
They weren't eligible for any bonuses. No, they were just paid the hourly rate.
Okay, but yeah, it depends on the company, really. But I need to add that any of my answers needs this extension. It depends. It always depends on many different things. But in cases that I have seen, the project hires, for example, they had basically the same base pay, but they also had some bonuses for achieving the targets of the project.
Right.
So it's the different mechanism of how you give money to people. So regular employees receive regular bonuses, and this one's just for the completion of work.
That's very interesting that you mentioned project work, because as far as I understand, product work for software development is very much different. And so you don't need anyone to leave your product team. You want people to stay for ages.
Yeah, but I mention in projects because usually temporarily workers work on projects, because in projects you have a limited timeline and limited resource, while in product development, you sometimes do not know when you're going to finish.
There's a good comment in the chat that you can't compare because contractors pay their taxes and social payments and pension by themselves. But I guess it depends on the country, no? Or
Yeah.
is it? Okay. All right. It's also interesting that I've heard that with all those layoffs, which are currently happening across the US and somewhere in Europe too, a very different labor law is present in countries. So like in France, one startup had to notify people 3 months in advance before they actually started doing layoffs. They also had to pay them when the people left the company. And in the US, just 1 day.
Yeah.
So it's also part of the compensation, the risk of being laid off, just like that, as in the US with at-will employment that they have.
Yeah, but in some countries, there is a kind of a wide law to interpret the terms you need to put in the contract. So in some countries, employees just insist on adding some points in the contracts, like you cannot fire us immediately. You need to write down some time. You will need to announce.
But what I wanted to say is that if you are looking at changing your country that you live and employing in some different country, you need to take this into account as well. As far as I remember, maybe I'm wrong, please correct me if I am, that in Germany, you are eligible for a decent allowance from the government for 6 months, I think, after you've been laid off from the company. So it means that you are more safe in certain countries.
Yeah, I need to say I'm not an expert in every labor law in every European country, but that sounds a lot like the German way of employing.
Oh, there's a good comment that you only eligible if you have an EU passport. Yeah, makes sense, of course. They protect their citizens first.
Yeah, but also when switching jobs to a different country, you need to consider a lot of different things, like the cost of living, the cost of things that are usual to you. For example, in the USA, people on their high intelligence job do not really accept offers without the how's it called, eye medical support and medical support in general, because any medical services in the USA are really, really expensive.
We have 3 more questions. One from Andrei. Thanks for the session. Kirill, I have a question regarding current demand in engineering and IT managers, engineering managers in Europe, namely Netherlands. Is it a hot market now? Do you have any data on that?
Well, based on what I know, good engineering and IT managers in Europe are in high demand all the time. But I need to add the same thing I've said during the session, that just the IT managers and just engineering managers are not in high demand because there is no lack of skills. There is lack of particular people who are able to drive business forward.
Right.
With this mindset I've been speaking about. So if you're of a client who can provide this kind of qualities, then yes, definitely.
Thank you. And another question: is it important for an engineering manager to be able to code, to do the coding, or employers are looking mostly for people business management skills?
Well, is it important or not? This is better be asked an engineering manager. I would say that based on my experience, when a company hires a manager, in particular engineering manager, they mostly expect him or her to be a manager, meaning to manage people, to drive engagement, to give the direction, to just general management skills.
Thank
As
you.
well, to code, there are coders.
That's great to hear, actually, for me. There is another question from Andrei. Sometimes hear that team leads are not about money. Do you really observe that this is more of a parallel career track, or do team leads get a raise for the pains, parallel to software developers?
Well, team leading is definitely about pay, among other things. Because if we get back to the slides about the value for the company and about the leveling system, team leader is always at a higher level than its employees, because he's responsible for what the employees are doing. If something goes wrong, then management will not come to the regular developers. They will come to the team leader. So yeah, I would say that in most cases, team leader should earn more than any of the people he's leading. There are some exclusions where, for example, there are some, well, you probably know that there are some experts of really rare qualities, some rare knowledge you cannot really buy from the market. In these cases, but well, does he need to be here, she? Does this person needs to be in this team leader's team then?
Roger, thank you for the questions. I think we're done with questions. Maria, what do we have about timing? Is it okay?
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes. So yeah, I think we can finish here.
Yeah, first, I want to thank you, Kirill. That was really, really insightful and interesting talk that you gave us. What I particularly liked about it, that I will have more data to compare if I have an offer, let's say, from a European company. I will tell them, no, it's too low of a salary or too high of a salary. That's good. And I loved that you explained that it's not just skills, because it's always been like that, but companies are understanding it even more now, that it's about people first and their qualities and traits. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I mean, we had a case of a really large telecommunications company in Spain. So they had a major digitalization project. During this project, they understood that their financial analysts, well, they do not need them anymore. And instead of just firing them, they started to look on what competencies do they have.
Nice.
So in the end, they understood that it's really easy to reskill those financial analysts to data scientists. So they achieved two objectives at the same time. They did not fire a lot of people, and they have found a lot of new data scientists.
And they retained those who know the business domain really well, which is of key importance sometimes. Because I think I once observed software developers who were joining fintech company, and they had to actually learn what the finance thing is all about for quite a while. It was up to 3 months for them to understand the peculiarities of the business domain. And the example you just mentioned means that those folks already knew everything, which is good for the company.
Yeah, and as an employer, you always want to retain instead of buy from the market. Because even when someone leaves, it takes you from 6 to 24 monthly salaries of this person to replace him.
Yep. And what's worse, that you destroy some good social dynamics that you have in your company, because people form some communicational patterns with each other anyway. So why not retain them?
Yeah, it's also about not hiring too much.
Yeah.
Some game developing companies, for example, had a rule of not hiring more than 10% of new employees per year. And this one company I'm speaking about have broken this rule. And now gamers do not like what they do.
Yeah.
I won't say what this company is, but you'll be able to search it in like 5 minutes.
Right. Well, thank you once again. And dear audience, thank you so much for being with us, listening and asking questions. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Kirill. Let's wrap it up. I'm stopping the recording now, Masha.